My name is Charlotte, and this is my story, told in my own voice, the way I remember it. That day began quietly, almost gently, as if it wanted to trick me into believing nothing would go wrong. The wedding was held at a large white house on the edge of Savannah, in America. The house had been standing there for many years, with wide steps, tall windows, and pale curtains that moved slowly when the wind came in from the trees. A long driveway curved toward the front door, and cars lined it from early morning. I arrived just after noon, wearing a simple dark blue dress and holding my daughter's arm as we walked together. The garden around the house was carefully prepared. White chairs were placed in neat rows, soft music played from hidden speakers, and the smell of fresh flowers filled the air. Roses and lilies were everywhere. Someone had spent a lot of money to make this day look perfect. I knew that person was partly me. I had quietly paid $25,000 to help with the wedding costs. I did not do it for thanks or attention. I did it because I wanted peace in the family and because I believed that sometimes kindness can soften even hard hearts. My daughter Elena stood beside me, calm and graceful. She wore a pale green dress and had her hair tied back simply. She did not look nervous. She did not look angry. She looked strong, and that gave me comfort. As her mother, I had seen her face in many moments of life, in pain and joy, in fear and courage. That day, her eyes were clear. She had no idea what was about to happen, and I was grateful for that, even if only for a short while. Guests moved around us, laughing, greeting one another, holding drinks, and talking about the weather and the decorations. Some people recognized me, but most did not. That was normal. I was used to being invisible at family events. My brother Richard had always been the louder one, the one who filled the room with his voice. I had learned long ago to stay quiet, to watch, and to listen. The house doors opened, and Richard stepped outside. He looked pleased with himself, dressed in a sharp gray suit, his hair carefully styled. He had that familiar smile on his face, the one that never reached his eyes. When he saw me, he paused for just a moment. I could tell he was surprised, maybe even annoyed, that I was there. We had not spoken much in recent years. Distance had grown between us, not only in miles but in respect. Richard walked closer, stopping in front of us. His eyes moved from my face to my daughter's face. There was no warmth in his look. In front of the guests standing nearby, he lifted his hand slightly and said, loudly enough for others to hear, "Well, this is your illegitimate child." His voice was sharp, almost playful, as if he were making a clever joke. For a second, everything seemed to freeze. The music continued to play softly, but it sounded far away. I felt my daughter's hand tighten around mine. I did not turn to look at her. I was afraid of what I might see in her eyes. I kept my gaze forward, my face still. Then his bride Madeline laughed. It was a short laugh, light and careless, like she had heard something amusing and harmless. That sound hurt more than the words. It echoed inside me, bringing back memories I had worked hard to bury. I felt the eyes of people around us, curious, confused, some uncomfortable, some amused. No one spoke. No one defended us. I did not shout. I did not cry. I did not ask him to repeat himself. I simply stood there, holding my daughter's hand, feeling the smooth fabric of her dress under my fingers, grounding myself in that moment. Inside, my heart was steady, but my mind was clear. I understood then that this day was not about a wedding anymore. It was about truth. Richard believed he knew who I was. In his mind, I was still the woman who had left home years ago with only $200 in her bag, a broken marriage behind her, and a child to raise alone. He believed I had struggled, barely survived, and remained small. He had never asked. He had never cared to know. To him, I was frozen in the past, stuck in a story he told himself to feel superior. He did not know about the nights I worked without sleep, the risks I took, the deals I signed, or the houses I bought with my own money. He did not know about the offices, the meetings, the responsibility, or the power that came with building something from nothing. Standing there in that garden, I realized how little my own brother knew me. I felt no need to correct him. Not yet. Around us, The guests slowly began to move again. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered. The garden that had felt so peaceful minutes earlier now felt tight and heavy. The White House behind us stood silent, its walls holding secrets, just like I did. I looked down briefly at my daughter. Elena lifted her head and met my eyes. She did not look ashamed. She did not look broken. She gave me a small nod, as if to say she was all right. In that moment, I felt a deep pride that no insult could touch. I knew then that this was only the beginning of the day, and that what was hidden would soon come into the open. I stayed where I was, calm and quiet, letting everyone believe what they wanted. The truth did not need to rush. It had all the time it needed. After Richard's words fell into the air that day, my mind did not stay in the garden or the old house. Instead, it traveled backward through time, to the years when my life truly began. Long before that wedding, long before the white chairs and quiet music, I had walked away from my family with nothing but my daughter, a small suitcase, and $200 folded inside my coat. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. That silence shaped me more than anger ever could. I first settled in Milwaukee, renting a narrow apartment above a closed bakery. The stairs smelled like dust and old paint, and the windows rattled when trucks passed. I worked during the day at a small office owned by a man named Harold, who paid me $12 an hour and trusted me with more work than my title allowed. At night, I cleaned hotel rooms to cover food and rent. I slept little, but I learned much. I learned how people spoke when they wanted something, and how contracts mattered more than promises. When the work dried up, I moved again, this time to Boise. The city was quieter, the streets wider, and the sky seemed endless. I shared a house with two other women, Lydia and Marianne, both trying to escape their own pasts. We cooked simple meals, shared bills, and talked late into the night about what kind of future we wanted. I saved every dollar I could, sometimes living on $5 a day, telling myself it was temporary. Opportunity came from unexpected places. I met Daniel, an older consultant who noticed how quickly I understood numbers and patterns. He offered to teach me more, not for money, but for loyalty and effort. I accepted without pride. Under his guidance, I learned how companies grow, how they fail, and how power often hides behind quiet desks. I followed him to Columbus, where I took my first real risk, investing $8,000 into a small logistics project. That money represented years of sacrifice, but it doubled within a year. From there, my life changed direction. I moved to Santa Fe, where I bought my first small house, a one-story place with a red door and a narrow yard. It cost $180,000, and signing those papers felt like stepping into a new version of myself. For the first time, I felt stable. Elena had her own room. I had a desk by the window. I worked long hours, but they were my hours, building something that belonged to us. Business grew slowly, but steadily. I learned when to speak and when to stay silent. I learned to walk away from bad deals and to trust my instincts. Over time, I expanded into other cities, including Lexington and Fresno, hiring people who were hungry for opportunity, just as I once was. I paid fair wages and expected honesty. Word spread quietly, and my company took shape without loud announcements or public attention. Eventually, I registered the main office in America, keeping my name off press releases and public records. I preferred privacy. The company expanded into Europe, opening a small branch managed by a woman named Clara, who reminded me of myself when I was younger. By then, the company was valued at more than $40 million. I still live simply, driving an old car and wearing plain clothes. Money was a tool to me, not a symbol. During all those years, my family never asked where I was or how I lived. There were no phone calls, no visits, no concern. I stopped expecting them. I focused on Elena's education, her safety, and her confidence. I paid $60,000 for her university studies and supported her dreams without pressure. She never lacked love, even when money was tight. What I found most painful, looking back, was not the struggle, but the assumption. Richard assumed I had failed. He assumed I was weak. He assumed my silence meant shame. In truth, my silence was choice. I had learned that not everyone deserves access to your story. The irony of it all sat heavy in my chest that day at the wedding. Madeline, the woman who laughed at my daughter, worked for my company. She had signed her contract without reading the name of the owner closely. She earned $90,000 a year and often spoke with admiration about leadership and fairness. She praised the values I built, never knowing they were mine. Standing there in the garden, I realized how small the world truly is. People walk through life believing they understand others, never knowing how little they see. My success was not loud.
It did not demand respect.
But it existed, strong and steady, waiting for the moment it would no longer need to hide. I did not build my life for revenge. I built it for survival, for dignity, and for my child. And as the memory faded and my mind returned to the present, I knew that the truth they ignored for years was about to stand clearly in front of them, whether they were ready or not. The moment Richard's words settled into the air, something shifted around us. It was not loud, but it was clear. Conversations faded, footsteps slowed, and even the soft music playing near the garden seemed to weaken, as if it sensed it no longer belonged there. I remained where I was, standing straight, my hand still resting over my daughter's. I could feel her breathing, steady and controlled, and I drew strength from that calm. Then I heard hurried footsteps on the stone path behind us. A man pushed through the guests, his face tight with fear and confusion. It was Thomas, the father of the bride. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie slightly loose, and his eyes were wide in a way that told me he already knew the truth. He stopped in front of me, breathing hard, and raised his voice without thinking. "Forgive my daughter," he shouted. "She doesn't know who you are." The garden went completely silent. Every head turned toward us. Chairs scraped lightly against the ground as people shifted to see better. Someone near the back cleared their throat, then thought better of it. The air felt open and sharp, like everything hidden had suddenly been dragged into the light. Thomas turned away from me and faced the guests. His voice trembled, but he continued. He said my name out loud, clearly, without hesitation. He said I owned the company his daughter worked for. He said I was the one who signed the contracts, approved salaries, and made final decisions. He said that one word from me could protect a career, or end it without noise. A low sound moved through the crowd, not quite a gasp, not quite a whisper. People began to connect the pieces in their minds. Faces changed. Smiles faded. Some guests looked at me differently now, with confusion, respect, or fear. Others avoided my eyes altogether. I looked at my brother. Richard's face had lost all its color. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again, as if he wanted to speak but no longer trusted his own voice. The confidence he carried moments earlier had disappeared. He looked at me the way one looks at a stranger who suddenly reveals a familiar truth. In that moment, I saw him understand how wrong he had been and how little he truly knew. Madeline stood frozen beside him. Her laughter had vanished completely. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, and her eyes were fixed on me, wide and calculating. I could almost see the thoughts racing through her mind.
Her job,
Her future.
her pride.
Everything she believed was secure now stood on uncertain ground, and the person holding that ground was the woman she had laughed at. I felt no urge to raise my voice. I did not need to defend myself. The truth had already done the work for me. I stepped forward just enough to be heard, my voice calm, steady, and clear. "There will be no wedding here," I said. The words were simple. They did not carry anger. They did not need to. I was not asking. I was stating a condition. Thomas nodded immediately. Relief washed over his face, as if he had been waiting for permission to act. He said it would be so, and he meant it. He turned to the event staff and began giving instructions without delay. The music was turned off. Guests were politely asked to step back. Chairs were moved. The garden that had been prepared for celebration began to empty with surprising speed. No one argued. No one questioned the decision. Power does not always need explanation. Madeline finally moved. She turned sharply toward Richard, her voice low but full of anger. I could not hear her words, but I did not need to. Her expression said enough. She had built her expectations on a story that was incomplete, and now she understood the cost of that lie. Without looking at me again, she walked back toward the house, heels striking the stone path, her posture stiff with humiliation and rage. Within minutes, she was gone. The guests followed soon after, some whispering, some silent, some avoiding eye contact as they passed me. A few offered polite nods, uncertain smiles, or brief words that meant nothing. The garden emptied until only family remained, standing awkwardly among the chairs and flowers that now felt misplaced. Richard approached me slowly. His shoulders were tense, his movements unsure. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, stripped of its earlier sharpness. He said my name. He said he was sorry. He said he did not know who I had become. I looked at him carefully. I saw regret, yes, but I also saw fear. Fear of what he had lost. Fear of how exposed he now felt. His apology came too late to reach where it needed to go. I did not hide, I said calmly. You never asked. He had no answer to that. I turned to my daughter. Elena stood tall, her face composed, her eyes steady. I placed my hand on her shoulder, grounding us both in that moment. We did not need to stay any longer. The house, the garden, the unfinished wedding, it all belonged to a version of the past I no longer lived in. As we walked away, I felt no victory, only clarity. Truth does not always come with satisfaction. Sometimes it simply arrives, stands firmly, and changes everything around it. That day, in the open air, my silence ended, not with anger, but with undeniable presence. The evening settled slowly after the guests left, like a heavy curtain falling over the old house. The garden lights remained on, glowing softly against the dark sky, shining over empty chairs and scattered petals. The silence felt different now. It was no longer tense or waiting. It was final. I stood near the edge of the garden with my daughter, breathing in the cool air, letting the moment close itself without rushing it. Some endings do not need words. It was then that Richard came to me alone. The noise of the day had stripped him down to something smaller. His steps were careful, as if he feared the ground might give way beneath him. He did not look like the man who had spoken with such ease earlier. His shoulders were low, his face tired, his confidence gone. He stopped a short distance away, unsure if he even had the right to stand near me. He spoke quietly, almost pleading.
He said he was sorry.
He said he never knew what I had become. He said he was ashamed of himself and of his words. He told me that he had been blind, that he had judged me based on an old memory and never bothered to see the truth. His voice cracked once, and for a moment, it sounded real. I listened without interrupting him. I owed him that much, if nothing else. But as he spoke, I felt no pull toward forgiveness. I felt only distance. His apology came after the damage, after the public insult, after the laughter that could never be unheard. Regret spoken too late does not heal what was broken long ago. I thought of every year I spent unnoticed, every holiday without a call, every family gathering where my absence was accepted without question. I thought of the nights I worked while raising my child alone, the fear I carried silently, and the strength I built without witnesses. I thought of how easy it had been for him to believe the worst of me, and how comfortable that belief had made his life. Forgiveness is not something that appears just because someone asks for it. It grows from accountability, from understanding, from years of respect. None of those things had existed between us. I did not hate him. I simply no longer felt responsible for his feelings. I looked past him and saw my daughter standing beneath the garden lights. Elena's posture was calm, her head held high. She did not look broken. She did not look angry. She looked complete. In that moment, I understood something clearly. My duty was not to repair my brother's guilt. My duty had always been to protect my child and the life we built together. I accept your apology, I said at last. But I do not forgive you. The words were steady, not cruel. They were honest. Richard nodded slowly, as if he expected nothing more. There was sadness in his eyes, but also understanding. For the first time, he seemed to realize that some bridges do not collapse in a single moment. They weaken over years of neglect until they can no longer carry weight. I turned away from him without another word. There was nothing left to say. Elena and I walked back through the garden together. The house behind us stood quiet, its windows dark, its celebration erased. As we reached the car, I took one last look at the place where so much had been revealed. I felt no regret about ending the wedding. I felt no guilt for standing firm. I had spent too much of my life making myself smaller to keep others comfortable. The drive away was silent. Streetlights passed us one by one, and the road stretched open ahead. Elena rested her head against the window, peaceful. After a while, she reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. That simple touch meant more than any apology ever could. In the days that followed, life returned to its rhythm. My company continued to grow. Contracts were signed. Meetings were held. Decisions were made. I remained the same woman I had been before the wedding, grounded and focused. Success had never been about proving anything to my family. It had been about freedom, stability, and self-respect. I heard later that Madeline left the city soon after. I did not interfere. I did not threaten. I did nothing at all. Power does not always need action. Sometimes restraint speaks louder than control. As for Richard, we did not speak again. There were no angry messages, no attempts to argue, no efforts to rewrite the past. The distance between us became permanent, and I accepted it without sorrow. Not every relationship is meant to be repaired. Some exist only to teach us where our boundaries must remain. I kept my company. I kept my dignity. And I kept my silence. This is my story, told not for pity or praise, but for truth. I am Charlotte, a woman who built her life with her own hands, protected her child with quiet strength, and learned that respect is not given by blood, but earned by character.